Hello. Good evening, everyone. Really happy to be here. And I'll tell you why in a second. Now, Brazil is a special place for me because I look at all the countries that we have deployed Waze, and Brazil has the biggest impact of all, right? Because if you're using Waze, raise your hand for a second, right? Now just try to imagine what it was like without Waze. It's nearly impossible, right? You cannot plan in São Paulo. You cannot plan to be on time anywhere in São Paulo without Waze. And if you think that the added value of Waze is saving you time, it's actually making you so much more efficient because you can be on time. And this is a leapfrog in the business culture, the way that I experience that I'm coming here not that often, right? So maybe twice a year. In the last decade, I've seen the evolutions of 10 years ago, people would tell me, okay, you will stay in the hotel and we will come maybe at 10, maybe at 11, maybe we don't know, versus we're gonna be there at 10, right? And because of that, Brazil is very special market for me. Now, in addition, I ended up with having here multiple services that turns out to create a lot of value to a lot of people. So Waze, we know, Move It, which is, if you're using Move It, raise your hand for a second, right? So quite a lot of people using Move It as well. And actually answering the same challenge, right? How do we get from here to wherever we want to go right now, but using public transportation? NG turns out to be successful here as well. It deals with the frustrations of going to the mechanic. And so it seems like many of the startups that I'm building ended up to be successful in Brazil, which always makes me happy to come here and meet the people and feel that I'm actually creating value for the people. What I would like to do this evening is speak a little bit about entrepreneurship in general. And I see a lot of young people here. If you are going to build a startup, raise your hand. That's pretty impressive, right? I like that because we, the entrepreneurs, are going to change the world. We are going to change the world, make it a better place. And so, in general, I would say the world needs more of us to change it to a better place. And so I will speak about the passion for change. I will speak a little bit about the Waze story. I'll speak a little bit about disruption. And hopefully, and this is really focused on entrepreneurs, there are some key learnings here that you should take into your journey. And if by any means I would be able to make one of you just a little bit more successful than you already are, then I actually did my part. So entrepreneurs, usually starts with building a feeling and an emotion towards something. So either you hate something, like I hate traffic jams, or you really love something and you tell yourself, this is how things should be, right? And then you start to build the passion around that, and to the level that you basically say, you dream about it every night. And you keep on dreaming about it every day until you tell yourself, this is what I'm going to do. And immediately you realize that if you are actually going to go this journey, then this journey is a roller coaster journey. There are ups and downs, ups and downs. And if you have built a business before, then you would know that all businesses have ups and downs, right? Life is full of ups and downs. But when you're building a startup, the frequency of those are dramatically higher, right? That could be a few times a day, ups and downs, few times a day. And I see here someone smiling because he recognized that. And at the same time, for entrepreneur, there is no doubt what's next. It's always the next startup. So if you would ask someone, okay, what are you doing? They will tell you, I'm building my startup, right? This is exciting. And what are you going to do after that? They will tell you, I'm going to build another startup. Now here comes the interesting question. If you would ask them, okay, this next startup of yours, what it's all about, They actually know. And so we built Waze in 2008. We launched the service in 2009. In 2009, I already knew that I'm going to build something that deals with financial fees. But I only built that after we sold Waze in 2013. When I built that, I already knew that I'm going to build another one and another one and another one. And at any given time, I have so many problems that I would like to address that I kind of have a pipeline of startups that I will be building, hopefully. And so I want you just for a second to think about going into this journey of building a startup exactly like falling in love. So there are many ideas that you think of, and eventually there is this one idea that you'll tell yourself, this is the idea that I'm going to work on, right? Or you go to many dates, and eventually there is one that you tell yourself, she is the one, right? Now, when this happens at the beginning, you only want to spend time with your date. You don't care about the rest of the world. You're thinking about your idea from multiple perspectives, right? You think about it from, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, and this is the solution, and this is how I'm going to build it, and this is my team, and this is what I'm going to do tomorrow morning, and this is how it's going to look like a year from now. And you keep on thinking about it from multiple points of view until you feel confident enough. And then you go and tell your friends, this is what I'm going to do. And usually they will tell you, this will never work, right? Or this is the stupidest idea that I ever heard, right? Or you take your date for the first time to meet your friends and they're saying, she's not for you, right? This is where you disengage from your friends. So the good news is that you are in love and you don't listen to anyone else. The bad news is that you are in love and you don't listen to anyone else, right? But the reality is that you have to be in love with your idea in order to go through the hardship of the journey. And the journey is really long, really complex. If you're not in love, you will give up. Now, the journey is really long, and the longest part of the journey is right here, where it says lack of traction, right? This is where you build the product, and you expect that to work, and it's not. Or you build the product, and you expect people to come, and they're not coming, right? And this is where you can imagine that as crossing the desert, right? So just imagine you try to cross the desert, and there is only sand around you, right? Or you try to cross the jungle and there are full of trees around you, and every time that you're making progress, you're making really baby steps in terms of progress, and you still look around you and there are only trees around you, so you don't see that you're making progress. But at the end of this journey, at the end of the jungle, at the end of the desert, you will be out of there. Now, there are two things that you don't want to happen while you are in the middle of the desert, right? You don't want to run out of supply. Or in the world of startups, you don't want to run out of money. And you don't want to change directions. If you keep on changing directions, you might be ending up going in circles, and you'll never get out of the desert or of the jungle. And this is pretty critical to remember, right? This is our mission. We keep on focus our mission. We keep on going into this direction. The fact that there might be other things that we can do, we don't care about them. Now, the reality is that the journey is a journey of failures. Now, I want you to think about it, right? If you're afraid to fail, in reality, you already failed because you're not going to try. But the journey is something that we're trying to do something new that no one did before, right? And so even though that we are 100% sure where to go, we don't know, so we try. We try one thing and it doesn't work. We try another thing that doesn't work. We keep on trying different things until we find one thing that does work. And then we start to repeat that, right? So we are actually moving from one part of the journey into the next part of the journey, into the next part of the journey, and each one of them is a journey of failures. Now, if you accept this for a second, then in order to be successful, here's what we need, right? We need not to be afraid to fail. We need to make multiple tries, right? Because the more that we try, the more likely that we will discover the one thing that does work, right? So every time that we fail, what is really important is that we get up and keep on trying, right? We try another thing, then another thing, and another thing. And every time that we try, we are 100% sure that this is it, right? Now, a second later, once we discover that it's not, then how fast does it take us to recover and continue these tries? This is what will make us successful. The persistency and the speed of making new and new and new tries. Now, the other part of journey of failures is that we celebrate a lot of things, right? In your budget, you should have budget for people, budget for operation, budget for marketing, and budget for caipirinha, because we need to celebrate a lot of things, right? And so we celebrate the first of everything, right? The first office, the first version, the first employee, the first time that they write something on the paper, whatever happens the first time, we celebrate. Much better than that, if someone is suing us for patent infringements, that means that someone cares. That means that there is someone in the market that believes that what we are doing is so significant that it's worthwhile to try to stop us. Now, when this happened, it's a good reason to celebrate. It's the same if your system crashes because of overloading, right? Now, not based on single user. That's easy. That I can write this code myself, right? But if all of a sudden there is a huge article on you in global TV, and as a result there are millions of users and the system crashes, that's amazing news. The worst case is that no one is coming, which is usually the normal case. Now, the best is when people actually thank you for what you have done for them. Then you know that you have created value. Then you know that you're on the right path of changing the world. And when this happens, you go home, and you go home happy, and you go to sleep with a smile on your face. Because usually, and I would be quoting here Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, right? He used to be a CEO of a startup, and one day he was asked whether or not he was sleeping well at night as a CEO of a startup, and he said, "Oh yeah, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried." And if you're running a startup, then you know that you, in many cases, you go home crying, but when someone thanks you, you go home smiling. The first part of the journey, usually I call that the first year, but this year can last maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes even 10 years. It's the most important part. This is where we are looking for product market fit. This is where we are looking to build something that creates value. Now, the journey for that is relatively long, and it's the most important part. I want you to think about this way, right? If you haven't figured out the value that you are generating, you will die. Sooner or later, you will die. And so the first part of the journey is always about product market fit. Now, you look at your smartphones, and you look at all the applications that you have on the first page, so those that you are using on a regular basis, and I would ask you, what is the difference between those that you are using today and the first time that you have used them? And the answer is that there is no difference. The first time that you have used it was after they figure out product market fit, and since then, nothing changed, right? So they have changed in there maybe a little bit in the look and feel, in the scalability, and the ability to support multiple languages. They change in the back end of it, but not in the user experience, not in the value that they are generating. Now, you think that it's easy and it takes no time to figure that out. It's actually the longest part of all the journeys, right? And so even if you take Microsoft, for example, that you tell yourself, okay, you know what? In 1980, Microsoft figured out that they should be building the operating system for the computer, and IBM at the same time was actually building the computers themselves. You also have to remember that Microsoft started in 1975, right? So 5 years to figure out product market fit. Netflix. Who is using Netflix here? Right? Pretty much everyone, right? Netflix, the way that we are using that started in 2008. But as a company, they started in 1998, 10 years before that. It took them 10 years to figure out product market fit. And so the journey of figuring out product market fit sometimes takes many years. And it's critical because this is where you actually create value. This is where you figure out this is the value that we are creating. Now, there are other things that happen during this period of time. You establish the DNA of your company. And this could be the most amazing working place you ever had, which is, by the way, this is exactly what you should be aiming at. Or this could be a nightmare place with internal politics that you hate to go there. You can dream of what kind of DNA you would like to have and build a company to fulfill that. And this is an opportunity that you only have at the beginning, because as soon as you start to bring people on board, and if you haven't defined the DNA beforehand, then the DNA of the company will be established. The business culture, after 1 year, the company will have a business culture. If this is the one that you like, it's up to you to decide. So you think about the first period of time, and it's the most critical period of time. By the way, once you figure out product market fit, and this is really, really challenging, because all of a sudden, you change the focus to something else, right? So the product was the most important part up until now. All of a sudden, from this point on, it's something else, right? So maybe it's scaling, maybe it's going global, maybe it's making money. It's a different part of the journey, but it's very challenging in terms of a change for a startup, because at the beginning, everyone is focused on one thing, and then maybe even overnight, you basically say, okay, this thing, product market fit, is not important anymore. We figured that out. Now what is important is something else. And sometimes very hard for organization to change. So if I need to simplify, what does it mean to build a startup? Then I want you to think of a problem, a big problem, something that the world will become a better place if we address that. And then start to imagine, so who has this problem, right? Now, if you happen to the only person on the planet with this problem, I would say go to a shrink. It's going to be much cheaper. But if a lot of people actually have this problem, then what I want you to do is go and speak with those people to understand their perception of the problem. Because if you're not listening to them, you're building a solution for your own problem. Maybe you will be building something that no one cares. If you're listening to them, you actually get a different perspective of what does this problem is all about. If you want an example, it's really easy. Look at Waze, right, and the value that it creates. And you take one type of audience, like Israelis, for example, and for us, the fact that we can outsmart the traffic and get there faster by 2 minutes is what makes us tick, right? Then you go to the Americans and you ask them, what is the value of Waze for you? And they will tell you that I know when I'm going to be there, right? They don't care about outsmarting the traffic. They care about the ETA. And then you go to Italians and you ask them, okay, so what is the value of Waze? And they tell you that we know what happened, right? So all of a sudden you address different problems for different people. And if you don't understand that, you build the wrong product. Now, once you understand this is the problem, here is the perception of the problem from the users, only then you go and build a solution. If you do that the other way around, you're going to build something that no one cares, right? So you're going to end up as a solution that is now looking for a problem. And you will explain that this is amazing technology, but no one cares. It's not about technology, it's about creating value. If you want to create value, solve a problem to someone. Solve a problem to many people. And then you create a lot of value. So if you're building a startup, this is the most important slide for you. By far, the most important slide that you have seen this week. And these are critical. So who are your users and what is their perception of the problem? The second that you forget that, you're starting to build something that no one cares, right? So you end up with developing features that no one cares. And then the next version, you're basically saying, okay, no one is using this feature, so I'm going to improve that feature, right? And still no one cares. You have to understand that, and you have to remain in touch with your users throughout the entire lifetime of your company. The day that you forget that, the day that you stop listening to your users, this is where you're going to stop, this is where you're going to start losing them, because you're going to build something that no one cares. Making your mistakes fast. Look, the biggest enemy of good enough is perfect. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be good enough in order to win the market. In fact, product development starts after you launch, right? Beforehand, you are building a prototype. So what you have in the first version is your underlying assumptions. What you have in the next version is the feedback from the users. This is where you're actually starting to build the product through iterations which are based on the feedbacks from the users. So if you'll tell me, okay, my product is not ready yet, I'm going to make it work better and fix that and build that until it's ready, you're wasting your time. You're really wasting your time because you're not learning anything new. The only way to learn something new is to get out there and get feedbacks from real users. So if as a result of that, there is someone here that will basically say, okay, you know what, I'm going to launch tomorrow morning instead of 2 months down the road, you're making the right decision. The sooner that you're going to go out there, the faster that you will learn. And the faster that you will learn, most likely the faster that you will fix that, and you will end up through the journey of failures, right? So multiple things that we are keep on trying, you will end up faster because you're going to do more tries. The DNA and the mission defines your journey. Look, if the DNA is wrong, you will suffer every day. If the mission is not right, people would leave you. If you tell yourself, this is the problem we are trying to solve, and everyone understands that, and you bring people that you like to work with, and they like to work with each other, then even when the journey will become challenging, even then, you will go through the hardship of the journey. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution, right? Every time that you tell the story about what you're doing, start it with what you're doing for me or for you or for someone rather than what we are doing. What we are doing is not important. What is the value that we are creating is this is the problem we are solving, right? When you start that, when you start to think about the problem first, you will end up as much more focused on building the right product than if you're basically saying this is what we are doing. Now, it's interesting because I happen to listen to a lot of entrepreneurs telling me their stories. And if their stories start with, we are building, then I say, stop. Don't tell me what you're building. Tell me why you are building it, right? This is the most important part. This is the problem we're trying to solve. Now, at the end of the day, if you claim ownership of a problem, you will become the market leader. All the market leaders are basically claiming ownership of the problem, not the solution. Focus. Look, very hard. If you're in a startup, then you know it. Then you tell someone the story and they tell you, you know what? You can do that instead of drivers. You can do that for fishermen or bike riders or skiers. And by the way, I heard all of those, right? And so you can do that for multiple segments, right? Focus is not about what we are doing. It's about what we are not doing. Saying no is the hard decisions that we need to make. Saying no is hard. Now, we can only focus if we say no to everything else that is not what we're trying to do. And this is critical, right? At the end of the day, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And in order to do that, we simply need to say no to everything else. Now, the last one turns out to be critical. I ended up speaking with a lot of entrepreneurs, and many of them, their last startup failed. And so I asked them why. You know, what happened? Why did it fail? And half of them said the team was not right. So I kept on digging, okay, what do you mean the team was not right? And so some of them told me, you know, we had this guy that was not good enough, or we had the marketing lead that was not experienced enough, or we had the CTO that was unable to recruit another people, and so forth. So not good enough was one reason. And then the other reason was they told me we had communication issues, right? So something that I actually call ego management issues, right? The rest of the team did not trust the CEO or vice versa and so forth. And then I asked them the most interesting question. When did you know that the team is not right? Now, all of them knew within the first month that the team is not right. I want you to think about it, right? You worked someplace, and there is someone that does not fit, right? Maybe because he's not good enough, maybe because he is a jerk and no one likes to work with him. Everyone knows that. Within 1 month, everyone knows that this person does not fit. Now, if everyone knows, and the CEO doesn't do anything about it, there are only two options, right? Number one, CEO is stupid. He doesn't know that. This is not good. Number two, he does know that and still doesn't do the right thing. That's even worse. The CEO lacks the leadership of making hard decisions. Making easy decisions is easy. Making hard decisions is hard. This is why no one likes to make them. And in most of the organization, in particular in small organization, they will go all the way to the top to make the hard decision because no one would like to make them. Now, if you don't make those hard decisions, you will die. At the end of the day, when I'm looking at the right CEO, I'm looking for few behaviors that are critical, right? So one of them, never give up, right? And this is critical because of the roller coaster, right? Because of the ups and downs, and even when we try and we fail, I want someone that doesn't give up. I want someone that is able to make hard decisions. Otherwise, I will need to make all the decisions myself, and I don't like that. So, and this is critical, right? The company is not going to be successful if the CEO is unable to make hard decisions. So a little bit about the Waze journey, and this is very, very interesting journey. It's very interesting because, we started 2007, so 12 years ago. If I would be here in 2007 and I will tell you this is what I'm going to build, you will tell me it will never work, right? And this is actually what we heard in 2007. Everyone told us, okay, this is the stupidest idea that we ever heard. It will never work, right? Now, the magic of Waze is that we, the drivers, creates everything that is being used by the app, right? So not only traffic information and police trap and so forth, that's obvious, but also the map itself. So when we started, that was the map of Tel Aviv, blank page. There was absolutely nothing on the map. And when the first driver drove, we collected the GPS data from the device, and if we take the GPS data from the device and draw that on the blank page, this is what we're gonna get. Now you can start to imagine what would happen if I take that from a lot of drivers. I'm starting to get something that looks like a map, right? If I will tell you that this is a traffic circle in the middle, it looks like a traffic circle, and it is a traffic circle. And if I would ask you, can you tell the difference between a main road and a street? You can see the density and tell me, okay, this is over there, it's a main street, and over there, it's a regular street, and so forth. If there is an intersection that no one is making left turn, then no left turn is allowed, right? If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and no one else coming the other direction, that will be one-way street, right? If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and only 2 coming the other direction, that is one-way street in Tel Aviv. So this is how we drive there. Now, anyone with a computer science background here? So we know that if I can describe something, we can build it. And this is exactly what we did. We built the server side of that takes all of this data and creates the map. Now, the map at the beginning is incomplete, but then we enabled map editing tools that people can provide us with street names and house numbers and points of interest. And at this phase, if we will have someone that is driving slow, then we can figure out that there is a traffic jam here. And if we have a lot of drivers all over, then we can figure out where all traffic jams are and start to route people to avoid them. So this is essentially the magic of Waze. We, the drivers, are creating a social network of drivers, and we help each other to avoid the enemy of all drivers, traffic jams. Now, is that really working? Let me see that. So what we are seeing in this video is how the map was created in a few places in Eastern Europe. Right? And we can see the date, beginning of 2010. And by the way, it will zoom in into the center area, but it took the map about 6 months to become good enough. Now, I want you to think about it, right? Good enough and free wins the market. No one can compete with free. No one can compete with free. So if you have a Gmail account, raise your hand, right? Pretty much everyone today, right? Before Gmail, people used to pay to have an email box, right? No one remembered that because as soon as Gmail came out as a free mailbox and good enough, basically everyone switched. And there is no way that you can charge money for that. Waze was free. As soon as we become free, there are only free apps today, right? Waze and Google Maps and here, and there might be others, but no one can charge money for that. Before Waze, people used to charge money for the app. So this is how the map was created, and the journey itself. Let me do a little bit of recap. 2007, the first version of Waze is running on a PDA. Remember? Long time ago, there were dinosaurs, and then PDAs, and then Nokia phones, and today we all have iPhones and Android phones, right? Everyone in this audience have either iPhone or Android phone. This long time ago is 10 years. Now, if I would be here 10 years from now, I will need to remind you that you used to have iPhones and Android phones. This is how fast things are changing. If I would have a time machine and I will send you back 10 years, so the first thing is that you might not survive, right? This is how chaotic the world looks like 10 years ago, right? But just imagine that. No iPhone, no Android phone, no Waze, no Netflix. Facebook was just the beginning, right? So maybe a little bit of Facebook, maybe not in Brazil, by the way. I think that 10 years ago there was no Facebook in Brazil. What else we don't have? So many things that we used to use today are less than 10 years old, right? Uber. 500,000 drivers of Uber in Brazil, right? No Uber 10 years ago. So now you think about it and then you start to ask yourself, okay, what does it mean 10 years into the future, right? And the pace of innovation is increasing, right? So it's hard for us to imagine, but I want you to think about the top 10 companies of the world, right? So Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook and Google and so forth, and ask yourself, which one of those are going to be in the top 10 years down the road? Now, the reality is that only half. Now, we don't know which half. If we would know, we will sell short on the other one, right? We don't know that. The more interesting part is which companies are going to replace them in the top 10. And some of those do not even exist today. So this is how fast things are changing. Now, we started in 2007. We built the first version running on a PDA, and we told ourselves, okay, this is not good enough. We need that on a smartphone in real time so we can collect GPS in real time and figure out the traffic. Otherwise, people don't care. And so we started a company. We were looking to raise capital, and we only raised capital at the beginning of 2008. And this is where we started the company. And then we launched the first product in 2009 in Israel. It was running on a Nokia phone. The first real-time version of Waze was running on a Nokia N95 and E71, if you remember. Long time ago, there were devices like that. And we saw that this is actually working beautifully, and it started out of nothing, out of thin air, right? So we the users created the map, and using the map and created traffic information and using that, and it's becoming more and more and more popular in Israel. So we decided that we can go and launch that everywhere. And so beginning of 2010, we made Waze available pretty much everywhere in the world. So if this is beginning of 2010, you can download Waze here in São Paulo and use that, except the fact that there is no one in this audience that actually did that, because it was not good enough. Remember this slide? So it turns out that what was okay in a small place like in Israel was not good enough in other places, and people got wrong routes trying to go from here to over there, and it will tell them, you know what, in order to go there, you need to start by going that direction and then go that direction and then come back and then go there and eventually get there, right? And so people like the story. We, the drivers, are going to fight traffic jams together, and they downloaded the app, and it was simply not good enough, so they quit. And so we are seeing all that from the system, right? Because we have pretty good metrics out of the system, and we see that people are trying and quitting, and we said, okay, we need to figure out what's wrong, right? And so we asked the drivers, and they tell us, this is not working, this is not working, this is not working. And so we go back into the drawing board and fix everything, and we build the next version that we know that solves everything, right? And so we release the next version, and we know that this is it, and it's not. And so we do the same thing again, right? We figure out it's not good enough. We speak with the drivers that tell us what's wrong. We go and fix that, and we know that we fixed everything, and we know that this is it, and it's not. Iteration after iteration after iteration, each one of them is making baby steps in terms of the one metrics that we care about, which is retention, right? So retention means that people keep on using that. That's, by the way, the clear indication that the product creates value, right? That people keep on using the product. And the whole year of 2010 went into iterations of the product, one after the other, after the other, after the other, until we become good enough. And we saw that only in 2011, that we reached the point that we are becoming good enough, and it was first of all in Los Angeles, actually, and then in San Francisco, and then in other metropolitan areas in the US. And in Europe, it was Italy first, and then Netherlands, and then France, and then one country after the other. Here in Latin America, it was Colombia first, and then Chile, and then Brazil, and then one country after the other. And this is how we have seen that in 2010. Now, in 2012, Waze was actually growing faster than the entire industry combined, right? So you take navigation apps and navigation devices, an in-car navigation system, and Waze was growing faster than all of them together. Now, in 2013, Google came with a proposal to acquire us, and we thought that this is the right offer, and we simply said yes. And I left. The day after the acquisition, I left, so I can build more startups. Now, one of the most important part is that when Google acquired Waze, they basically told us, okay, we believe in your mission, and we will let you to continue this mission, right? And so today, Waze is still doing the same thing that we dreamed of at the beginning, help drivers to avoid traffic jams. I want to speak a little bit about disruption, and I'm pretty sure that in the conference, you've heard a lot of things, the terms disruptive technology. There is nothing, there is no such thing as disruptive technology. Disruption is not about technology. It's about changing the way we are doing things, right? Or changing the market equilibrium, which might be a result of a new product, might be a result of a new price, right? So Gmail was free. There was email before Gmail, but it was not free. So you look at the disruption of the market and you ask yourself, what was the great change? The great change was it was free. Maybe it's a new business model that is being introduced to the market. Maybe it's a new knowledge that is being created and all of a sudden you change either the demand or the supply, and as a result you change the market equilibrium. You think about Uber for a second and you think about it from technology point of view and you realize that this is not complex technology. What they've created is knowledge. It's a marketplace which is based on knowledge that drivers knows where the next pickup is, and as a result there are much more drivers today, actually 10 times more trips, more on-demand trips than there were 10 years ago. So the market became dramatically bigger and very different than what it was before. Now, the disruptors are always newcomers. They are the ones that have nothing to lose. Existing businesses are not going to disrupt their own market. They simply have too much to lose. And so this is not going to happen, right? Entrepreneurs are newcomers. Someone coming from an outside market or a different market into an existing market, they can change. Existing players do not change. And so the opportunities for entrepreneurs is essentially disrupt the market and claim ownership of the new market, which is always bigger than the previous one. Now, this is critical to remember because this is essentially the opportunities that we entrepreneurs have. That we can look at the entire market and say, no, no, no. The way that it's being done today is wrong. We're going to change that. And that's the opportunity. Some examples, if you don't know how much you're paying, and it doesn't matter which market, right? Then you can create the knowledge and as a result change the market equilibrium. Broken business models, a market with a middleman. Middleman is a cover-up for inefficiency of the market. Now, if you add the efficiency to the market, you will change everything. Regulations that don't work, right? You travel to Europe and you buy goods, you're entitled to get the VAT back, which is in Europe is about 21% in average. Now, when you try to do that, you'll see that it simply doesn't work, right? 95% of the cases, people fail to get their money back. By the way, this is one of my new startups that deals with that, right? And so every time that I would be running into a big problem, I would ask yourself whether or not I can change that. And if I can, then I will. Now, here is a very interesting point of view, right? Because sometimes you ask yourself, okay, so the market changed completely, and the existing companies in the market before the disruption were really respectful companies, and you ask yourself, how can they not see that, right? So here are some examples, right? Here is the Netflix CEO going and meeting with the Blockbuster CEO and ask them to acquire them. Twice. That actually happened twice. And they say no. Now, who is using Netflix? Raise your hand again. Pretty much everyone, right? Who is using Blockbuster? There are actually 4 branches of Blockbuster in Alaska, right? So this is what left from the market leader. When the iPhone started, Microsoft said, this is maybe a niche, maybe nothing. It's never going to take off, right? And this is where Microsoft tried to build their own phone at the time. And so we know what happened to this one and to this one. Who invented the digital camera? Kodak did, actually. In 1976, they built in their lab the first version of digital camera. And they called the CEO to show him what they just built, right? And he said, shh, don't tell anyone, right? You cannot prevent revolutions. But the reality is that in many of those cases, at the time, Kodak was one of the top companies of the world, right? How can they not see that coming? Here is Google struggling, right, 1997, unable to raise capital, and they are being used as the search bar for Yahoo at the time for a short period of time. So they approached Yahoo and asked Yahoo to acquire them. And so Yahoo asked them, okay, so how much money do you want? And they said $2 million. And Yahoo said no. So we look at it today and we say, that was wrong decision, right? This is what you wanted to say. There are no wrong decisions. There are either right decisions or no decisions. But every time that you're making a decision and you choose a path, you don't know what it was like if you will choose a different one, right? So we don't know what would have happened if Yahoo would have said yes, right? Whether or not they would use Google and create Google the way that it is today, or they will simply let it die as part of Yahoo, we don't know that. And so when we are making a decision, it's always the right decision. Not making a decision is a mistake, but making a decision and then figuring out, okay, maybe we need to change that. Let's make a new decision, which is different, is the right way to move forward. Waiting is not an option. Now, what we also need to realize is that disruption, by definition, creates a larger and better market, right? If we are basically saying this is change in the market equilibrium, the market will not go there if it's not better. So you think of Uber, and you ask yourself, okay, so how big the market today compared to what it was 10 years ago? 10 times bigger. 10 times more people are using on-demand trips than it was 10 years ago, right? So obviously, this market is much more interesting than what we had here 10 years ago. And this is pretty much the same on all the cases that the market was disrupted. Look at before the iPhone, right? So there were BlackBerries and a little bit of Microsoft devices and a little bit of Nokia devices. And people estimated that in 10 years, there could be 200 million of smartphones. Now, I think that in Brazil, there are 200 million of smartphones, right? And so obviously, we realized that a leapfrog is changing the trajectory of the market, and this is critical. I want you just for a second to imagine the car industry, right? So this industry is really interesting because nothing changed in the last 100 years, right? 100 years ago, the most sellable car was Ford, and it was black, and it was doing about 16 miles per gallon. And last year, it was Ford, and it was black, and it was doing about 17 miles per gallon. So last year, it was Ford F-150. But in reality, when you think about this market, we drive cars the same way that our parents did. Nothing changed. But now I want you to imagine cars that can drive by itself, right? That you can click on a clicker, car shows up, you tell the car, takes me wherever, and then you get out of the car and you click on the clicker again, the car disappears, right? Now, if this is the case, I don't need to own a car. I need to have a clicker. And maybe I would have a big clicker for a big car, and a red clicker for a red car, and a regular clicker for a regular car, and so forth. But what it means is that I'm not going to buy car, I'm going to buy service. So what is changed is the business model will change. Now, if you're a car maker, and you don't switch from selling cars to selling mileage, you will die. The total number of cars sold in the world will be much smaller. The total mileage driven is going to be much higher. If you don't switch from the business model that dies into the business model that becomes significant, you will die. If you are selling car insurance and you don't switch from selling per car to sell per kilometer, you will die. If you are selling car loans, then you need to figure out what exactly that you are selling here, because you might have a major problem. If you have a driving school, you will die anyhow. Look, the next generation will not drive. The generation after that, if we will tell them that we used to drive cars ourselves, they will not believe us. This is how all is going to look like. Now, you don't think about it today, but 50 years ago, there was a driver for the elevator. It's hard to imagine, right? If someone will tell you that I used to be a driver for the elevator, you look at this guy and you say, what? This is exactly what's going to happen, right? Now, the reality, and this is important to remember, we think of ourselves as users, and we think that we are going to be the first one to adopt that. But the professional drivers are going to be the first one to be replaced, right? So just imagine you're using Waze every day. You're actually using Waze twice a day, going to the office and coming back, 2 hours per day. But if you are an Uber driver, you're using that 12 hours a day. So professional drivers will be replaced faster by the autonomous vehicles. Whether or not they're truck drivers or public transportation drivers, they will be the first one to be replaced, because the value of replacing the driver is much higher. If you don't know how much you're paying, you know, if this is about fees or mechanics or airfare, medical services, whatever it is, by the way, they're separated because the first three, I already have started to address them. The next three, not yet. So this is me, right? And I build startup. This is what I'm doing. And they're all about creating value. They are all about solving problems. It's always for me, okay, how can I create a lot of value to a lot of people? And here are my startups, right? So Waze we know, Move It we know, FeeX deals with the biggest secret in the world, financial fees. In the US alone, there are $700 billion of financial fees, 700 billion, right? This is about 25% of the GDP of Brazil. Now, the scary part is that people don't know that they're paying them. When I was young, my dad once told me that if you don't know how much you are paying, then you're paying too much. And I figured that out after 2008, and I basically say, okay, this is something that I'm going to build something to create the transparency in the market. NG deals with the frustrations of going to the mechanic. If I take my car to the mechanic, whatever they will say, I will say okay, because I don't know, right? So I feel like an idiot there, and they will tell me, okay, you need to do this and this and this and this, and I will say, yeah, okay, do that, right? And so we built NG because we feel helpless there, and I don't like to feel helpless. And NG is an app running on the smartphones, connects to the car computer, doing the diagnostics for you, telling you what's wrong, and then asking mechanic around you to quote to repair that. So empower the driver with the knowledge and with the ability to do price comparison. And there is nothing like price comparison to keep the market honest. Fairfly deals with the biggest secret in the travel industry, and this is what happened to airfare after you book your flight. Now, we know that prices are going up and down all the time. They're going up and down because the airlines have built a dynamic pricing model that optimizes the price based on the demand. So just imagine that Fairfly is the counterpart to that equipped to the users and to figure out exactly the same, right? So very possible that this is the price that we paid, and there is cancellation fees that is right here, right? But during the period of time between the reservation and the actual flight, the price can be here, going up and down all the time. It could be below the difference. And you can rebook the same flight at a cheaper price. So this is exactly what Fairfly does. Let's see what else. Refund It, the one that deals with the VAT claim, right? The VAT back. And today, when you try to claim the VAT, there is always something wrong. Maybe long lines at the customs, maybe different forms at the store. Maybe you get there and they tell you, okay, but the VAT claim is in a different terminal, right? And so we are building that in an app that all you have to do is scan the receipt, scan the boarding pass, scan your passport, and get your money back. As simple as that. C3 turns out to be very, very important here in São Paulo State. C3 is an agricultural technology company that creates, I would say, a way to figure out what's going on in the plantation, right? So just imagine that you are a farmer and you have a lot of trees. You have the entire plantations of trees. And the reality is that you don't know what's going on there. And so we have built a system that we have sensors mounted on drones flying over the plantation, and at the level of a single tree can tell you if this tree is healthy or not. And if it's not, then what is the issue, right? Maybe it's water stress, maybe it's nutrition, disease, whatever it is, and provide an actionable plan to the farmer to essentially increase the yield dramatically. And I keep on building those. I keep on building startups, and I actually have 3 more in the pipeline. So if I will be here next year, this slide is probably going to have 3 more names into it and so forth. And essentially, this is what I do. So maybe one more story. By the way, this is my email. I answer 100% of my emails, not necessarily in real time, but I answer all of them. The good news is that I fly a lot, and usually at the airplanes, I have plenty of time to answer all of my emails. During the Waze years and after that, look, if this is going to continue, I would need to ask you to stand up and start shouting, so we will actually counter the noise that they're making there. But during the Waze years, there were many people come to thank you for Waze and saying, you saved me from a nightmare traffic jams. There was one guy that told me that he owes me thousands of dollars in speeding tickets that I saved him. But one of the best stories I heard was a couple of years ago. Someone came to me and said, thank you. You saved my marriage. And I said, what? I said, well, because of Waze, we don't argue anymore, so you saved my marriage. And so I ended up to be a marriage consultant. But I think I owe the best story to my son. I have 5 children, and one of them is 21 years old, and he really likes to drive. So one day, I asked him to drive me to the airport. And he said, my phone is broken, I can't. And I said, what do you mean you can't? Here is the car, here are the keys, drive me to the airport. No, you don't understand. My phone is broken. I don't know how to get there. And so I was scratching my head, and I said, you know what? I'm going to be in the car with you, and I'll tell you how to get there. And then he told me, and how would I come back? So we lose orientation, but not logic. Thank you.